The words of our reading come to us from Reverend M. Jade Kaiser, co-founder of Infleshed, Spiritual Nourishment for Collective Liberation. I find little comfort in a God that transcends, as in rises above the body. This mess we're in, your pain or mine. What hope do I stake in a God who took on flesh only to later leave it behind? But tell me again of that divine breath, the one that animates soil and shapes life from the dirt. Call me back to the roots of this faith. Though I bow my head, I do not solemn submitting to any power on high. I lower my gaze in prayer to the deep. I seek the wisdom of holy kin closest to the ground. Those who make feasts of life's remnants, live out miracles of integration, and bear witness to the glory of the dark. There are too many lights on all the time, and all the tall towers grow more fragile each day. So I rest my hope in the God of the below, whose embrace has always been with us. Theirs is a transcendence that never leaves us behind, but always promises to fold us in.
When was the last time you really, truly rested? Not slept necessarily, though sleep is a great form of rest, but rested your body, your mind, your spirit. For many of us, if we're lucky, there's a cultural expectation that during our working lives, rest might happen once a year, for a week, again, if we're lucky. Perhaps if your life is ruled by the academic calendar, you anticipate a handful of days over a long weekend and the summer as a potential time of rest, though schedules do have a tendency to get filled in with activities of all kinds, social obligations and familial responsibilities, even when we are our most deliberate about freeing time from work for ourselves. Tricia Hersey, the Nap Bishop, and author of the recent book, Rest is Resistance, a manifesto, teaches us the following. We, as a culture, don't have clarity about what rest is and can be. These limitations and confusions have been created in us. We are born knowing how to rest and to listen to what our bodies need. It's second nature and an inner knowing. Infants and children follow their body cues and without doing so would not survive. This inner knowing is slowly stolen from us as we replace it with disconnection. We have been bamboozled and led astray by a culture without a pause button. We are barely surviving from our deep sleep deprivation, worker exploitation, and exhaustion. We must rest. Places of rest are important for all of us, especially the very many of us who have been tricked into believing that we can't possibly afford to do so. Rest is the space of possibility, and it makes relating to each other and to the realities of our shared world more accessible. Rest lays the groundwork for personal and collective transformation. This summer, I was transformed by working at a place of rest, a summer camp, ministering to campers as young as 9 and alongside adult staff who brought together formidable gifts and creativity to make a camp experience as restful, as safe, and as fun as possible for those young campers. I believe that camps create spaces of possibility for people young and young at heart to become and become renewed. And I've felt the far-reaching impact of community spaces of care which give people permission to pause the frantic pace of their everyday lives. It's a rare invitation to lean in and learn themselves into being and becoming apart from their family systems, schools, and other spaces which have a tendency to tell us what to do and who we already are. Camp ministry, having the opportunity to witness and move with folks as they are given permission to pause and rediscover possibilities for rest and joy in community, is nothing less than transformative and life-giving. And despite these joys, I did not go into this experience assuming I'd be transformed. And I must admit that as recently as a few years ago, the idea that I'd ever again spend time ministering with a community of folks while unmasked and in person felt utterly impossible. And yet, there I was, 3 years and 3 months after the first COVID lockdown, exploring camp ministry with nearly 20 youth, alongside a camp minister mentor and a groovy group of adult counselors and program staff. One morning, while leading worship outside, my fellow camp minister and I referenced listening as a form of prayer. And I cannot properly convey the wonder with which the campers took to this assignment, exclaiming about the rustling in the trees and the universe speaking in a language we can't always understand. It was a moment characterized by exquisite attention and no small amount of distraction by a whole community of kids and adults, and it reminds me that the present moment is all we have, even as much as we project our minds into the frustrations of the past and the anxieties of the future. Thich Nhat Hanh once wrote, "As long as your mind is listening to the rain, it is not thinking about anything else. You don't need to try to still your mind. You need only to relax and continue listening to the rain." Sitting in stillness like this allows us to see things as they truly are. As long as we're restless and the mind is unsettled, we won't be able to see reality clearly. But as soon as we restore our stillness, we can look deeply and begin to see the truth. I believe there are a few truths we could do with seeing more clearly in this time of great upheaval and great possibility we're living through. On the grounds of the camp I served this summer, there is a labyrinth, which feels like a spiritual center of this sacred place of rest. With bright stones marking the path on either side, the labyrinth commands thoughtful attention. It offers an invitation to circle around healing as you spiral towards the center. It's an active form of rest, to follow a path that coaxes you forward with a paced revelation of what's next. Every time I trace that path this summer, I notice something new. A sprouting seed pushing through the grounds below my feet, a new clarity about my own thoughts or the way my body felt while moving, or about my companions on the journey around the stones, or something of greater significance about the moment we're in. It's out of these journeys that I've come by a few observations about the significance of the cultural moment we find ourselves in. It seems to me that there has been a great silencing that is taking over our political discourse in this country, and which we are quick to accept as a path through the labyrinthine times we're living in. The Great Silence asks of us, if not to forget, then to at least not speak publicly on the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, let alone what the last few years of this era have changed in each of us. We shy away from naming the real losses, the millions of people who lost their lives, their grieving loved ones across this nation and across the world, and the effects of our collective trauma and omnipresent grief. We have not seen accountability of elected leaders for the mismanagement of a growing list of crises, from public health to the climate and beyond. We see countries declare war on their neighbors, which only adds to the trauma, the violence, and the grief we're all tangled in. Our hearts reach out from Ukraine to Palestine and Israel, but too often our silence echoes in the face of this violence. We are still facing deep spiritual losses as well. The loss of trust in our neighbors, family, and friends to protect themselves and each other. The loss of trust in our institutions to protect us and to offer pathways to a better life. A loss of hope about the stability of our shared future, and especially the loss of ease of spirit in face-to-face community. Have you felt the nagging fear at the back of your mind with every cough and sneeze you hear as summer shifts to autumn? I sure have. And it's okay to name that our awareness of illness and our tolerance for risk in community has been changed by this pandemic. This hasn't just affected adults, of course. Children have been experiencing this era of upheaval as well. Many of them too young to really remember much of the world in the before times, but old enough to have much to teach us about facing our fears with courage and finding ways to let joy shine through, to create new possibility where exhaustion has shut down our creativity. To riff off of Tricia Hersey, their inner knowing has not yet been stolen. They can teach us how to pause, how to notice the moment we're in, and act as human beings rather than react from our laundry list of human doings. If there's a list of spiritual lessons from summer camp I could offer, right at the top of that list would have to be that rest isn't optional. Rest is not something we can wait a lifetime to earn, nor something that can be given to us, traded, bought, and sold like 1,000 other commodities we no longer know how to live without. Every time this culture of restlessness tries to trick me into denying that rest is a need and should be a right accessible to all, I remember the image of an overtired child, perhaps a grumpy camper, and how utterly impossible shifting their reality becomes before their basic needs are met. What makes us adults think our needs are so different from those children? Would we not offer a tired child the chance to rest and return later if they needed it? Could we imagine advocating for a pause for ourselves in that way? A second sacred lesson: don't be fooled that your needs are so different from a camper's. Treat all needs arising in yourself with the care and patience you'd show a child who's depending on you to keep them safe, healthy, and happy. Because the child inside of you is, and you deserve that care as much as they do. Naming the silence in our midst can be a start to its own antidote. Just as we might name the needs in our lives that are still unmet. And this Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, I feel it's necessary to point to the connections between the ongoing silencing about the continuous impact of COVID with this nation's continuous history of white supremacist settler colonialism and the outright denial of this original sin concurrent with the violence of racialized slavery. Violence which built this nation as we know it. The impacts of this history are written all over our exhausting present, and not just invisible parts of our past. I think it's no coincidence that this time, which many want to call post-pandemic, has been characterized by the prevalent resurgence of revisionist history that amplifies white nationalist narratives and aims to erase and erode any sense of the ongoing multicultural history of this land, especially including the reality of the lives of many indigenous peoples who always have and still do live here. Rest isn't a luxury and can't be divorced from the reality of our lives. Tricia Hersey offers us tools to reclaim our shared humanity by shifting our relationship to rest. And through this awakening to the multitude of possibilities of how we might live differently. There are 4 fundamental tenets of the NAP ministry, she teaches. First, rest is a form of resistance because it pushes back and disrupts white supremacy and capitalism. Second, our bodies are a site of liberation. Wherever our bodies are, we can find rest. Third, naps provide a portal to imagine, invent, and heal. And fourth, our dream space has been stolen, and we want it back. We will reclaim it via rest. So here is my invitation to you. Whenever possible, reclaim your right to rest from our culture of exhaustion. Take a nap, create some art, walk a labyrinth, tie-dye some shirts, make new connections, do something that makes your spirit sing as often as you can. Don't wait for the right time or the perfect moment that fits in with the rest of your day, or week, or month, or lifetime. Give yourself permission to listen to the rain. Support places and spaces and people that promote rest. Whether it's summer camps or sabbatical funds, retreat spaces, authors, or artistic collectives. Cultivate a sense of spaciousness and pause in your life whenever possible. Remind yourself and others that our ways of life are endlessly evolving, and living is not the same as grinding ourselves to exhaustion. If camp ministry has anything to teach us, it's old lessons we've nearly forgotten with time. That we're never complete, but always becoming. That nature can be healing, and connection with a place and people requires reciprocity of care. That when we lose our way, we can turn to others to guide us back to the path, to cycle through the next twist of the labyrinth. In Wisdom of the Jewish Sages, Rabbi Rami Shapiro sums it up in the timeless interpretive translation of Rabbi Tarfon's words in Pirkei Avot 2:20, which offers a commentary on Micah 6:8, the same passage which supplied the lyrics for our anthem this morning. They teach, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. May we do the work that is ours, and may we rest well in the meantime. May it be so, and amen.